These undrafted free agents are legit. Yesterday, I made a video about all of the offensive free agents that the Chargers signed, but today we're gonna go over all of the defensive ones, and a lot of these guys flashed to me. So let's get through the full breakdown, starting with Michael Mason, the defensive lineman from Coastal Carolina. Michael is 6'3", 280 pounds. He played basketball and football in high school in South Carolina while also being an honors student. He was an unranked prospect committed to Wofford before transferring to Coastal Carolina for his final season. Meanwhile, he's on the Dean's list and working on 2 degrees. He had 7 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, a pass deflection. He can stack and shed against offensive linemen sometimes, but also he does get washed in the run game because he doesn't really play with great leverage consistently. He has power, strong hands. This is kind of like Justin Eboigbe light, so not great athleticism, but very powerful, violent hands. He doesn't have a great first step, but he can shoot gaps in the running game. He's disruptive as a 3-tech and 5-tech defensive lineman. He was a problem against UCLA, and even if he wasn't getting pressure, I saw a couple times where he would take the guard away for a linebacker to blitz freely. He's smart, he's powerful. I came away impressed with him, honestly. Now we got Savion Jackson, the outside linebacker from North Carolina State. Savion is 6'2", 263 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit out of North Carolina. He committed to NC State, played there for 5 seasons, and had a season-ending knee injury in 2022. He earned the number 9 jersey, which was worn by NC State legend Bradley Chubb, and he came back with his best season in 2023. I was shocked at how powerful this dude is. He was throwing the Wake Forest guys around. He was explosive in his first step as well. This guy just straight up plays with his hair on fire. He is chaotic. He's quick for a defensive lineman. He's shown the pass rush prowess and can stack and shed offensive linemen in the running game as well. He missed time in 4 out of his 5 seasons because of injury. He did not test well athletically, so that's why he fell so far. I do see it in this guy though. He's an interior pressure machine. He could disengage better in the run game. That would help out his game a lot. But also, if he can stay healthy, I think he could stick around in the NFL for a while. But also, doesn't really have great size. He's 6'2", 263, so he's kind of a tweener, not really an outside linebacker, not really a defensive lineman. Now we got Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, the linebacker from Ole Miss. Jeremiah is 6'2", 230 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit out of Florida. He committed to UCF, played there for 4 years before transferring to Ole Miss. He is hesitant to shoot gaps at times in the run game, but when he does, it's often the correct gap. He has the athleticism to play zone coverage. He can run out in the flat with a running back or a tight end. He can disengage from blockers pretty well at times. It seemed like he was the designated cover linebacker in that defense. He's very disciplined in coverage, patient when reading the quarterback's eyes and movement, but that's also a negative of his too because he tends to bite on whatever they do. So like play action or a QB option, it's gonna fool him. His change of direction isn't great, but he does a hop step sometimes to fill gaps and evade offensive linemen. That works pretty well. He lunges, tries to make arm tackles sometimes, so he needs to wrap up better. He had his best game of the year in the bowl game against Penn State, which is big time competition, and they had some good offensive linemen there like Hunter Norzad, the center. He played well against them. That was the biggest stage of his career, so he could earn himself a job on special teams, and when they were down at halftime against Tulane, he rallied the team in the locker room and they came back to win the game. That sounds like a Harbaugh guy to me. Now we got Tre'Mon Morris-Brash, the outside linebacker from Central Florida. Tre'Mon is 6'2", 256. He was a 4-star recruit out of DC, committed to UCF. He played for 5 seasons with 25 sacks, 6 batted passes, 114 run stops, and an interception. He doesn't have ideal size for the position at outside linebacker or defensive line. Again, this is a tweener, but he plays the run really well. He sets the edge nicely, has a high motor to go after the runner. He is fast coming off the edge as well. He's pretty physical at the point of attack, and he's got some sneaky strength, but here's where it gets interesting. He's shown the ability to drop into coverage as well, so could he drop some weight and develop into a Sam linebacker and be like an off-the-ball linebacker for the Chargers? Doesn't really have great speed, but he understands zone coverage and he has shown quickness in burst. So I don't know, if he drops weight and works with Ben Herbert, he could develop to be an off-ball linebacker because doesn't really have ideal length or height to be on the defensive line. Now we got Luquay Washington, the linebacker from Central Connecticut. Luquay actually is no longer a Charger. He agreed to terms with the Chargers, then decided to join the Chiefs instead. But, you know, rundown on him, he's had injuries, but he's very fast. I actually liked what I saw from him. So now let's go to the DB room. We got Akeem Dent, the safety from Florida State. This guy's 5'11", 190 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit out of Florida, committed to FSU, played for 5 seasons there. And he had 144 tackles, 2 sacks, 1 interception, 12 pass breakups, and 52 run stops. He has elite speed. If you look at the RAS scores, which grades a player's athleticism, and man, it shows up on tape. He's extremely rangy and instinctive. He has a smooth back pedal, really fluid movement. This is the guy that you want back there as a single high safety. He's a willing tackler and comes down to stop the run with confidence, and he has a good understanding of team run defense to force the runner into his teammates. He's not a consistent tackler and tends to put his head down and dive at guys' lower bodies. He's had by far the lowest amount of targets per coverage snap at 38.2 plays in coverage for every target, and he only allowed a 62.5 passer rating when he was targeted. He had 1 pass breakup on 6 targets this entire season. He had the second least amount of yards allowed and receptions allowed by safeties in all of college football. This is a cover 3 safety that can come down and blitz. He's a willing tackler that has run stop ability, navigates traffic well as a blitzer, and he's feisty near the line of scrimmage. This is a Jesse Minter safety for sure, and I think he's got a good shot at making the team. Now we got Thomas Harper, the safety from Notre Dame. Thomas is 5'10", 195 pounds, and was a 3-star recruit out of Tennessee. He played wide receiver and DB in high school, committed to Oklahoma State where he played 4 seasons, then transferred to Notre Dame this past year. He was mostly used as a nickelback, and he stood out to me immediately because he just wanted all of the smoke against everybody. He is feisty. He comes down in run defense with physicality and bad intentions. He graded as an elite athlete. He played against Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, who is going to be another top 5 pick next year in the Ohio State game. And he allowed 5 catches for 54 yards, which were both the most on his team. The reason for that was he would overcommit on some routes, and those are 2 elite route runners, but he typically stays in the hip pocket of wide receivers well and is really physical in coverage. He had an elite pass rush grade of 90.5, which was the highest among cornerbacks, an 88.9 tackle grade, which was 4th best in the country, 83.7 run grade, which was 13th best in the country. So all the PFF grades reflect his physicality and his viciousness on the field. He had 2 sacks, 36 tackles, and 17 run stops with only 2 missed tackles all year. He was the 12th best tackling cornerback in all of college football. He loves contact, only allowed 1 touchdown this year, but allowed the most receptions on his team with 26 receptions allowed. If he develops better route recognition skills, you could have a serious problem on your hands in the NFL. I love Thomas Harper, actually, maybe even more than like Tarheeb Still, our 5th round pick. He fits that Mike Samerstill mold so perfectly, and this is my official favorite undrafted free agent so far. He just needs to be coached up in coverage by Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh, and our safeties coach Chris O'Leary, who was at Notre Dame last year with Thomas Harper. And you know, I was actually wondering why he was listed as a safety, because most of his play at Notre Dame came from the nickel spot. I think maybe they figured that he's like Chris O'Leary's project guy and they want him to spend time with him. So they're listing him as a safety, so he's in that safety room with Chris O'Leary. Now let's move on to Jaelen Phillips, the safety from Clemson. Jaelen is 6 foot, 204 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit out of Georgia. He committed to Clemson, played all 5 years there with 187 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 14 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. And he played in the box a lot for Clemson, and he was good at breaking down on routes in front of him and towards the sideline. When he's in zone sometimes, he doesn't really have a good feel for the receivers that are around him, and that can get him into trouble. He takes good angles to the ball in the run game. For the most part, he is inconsistent in that area, and he only had 2 missed tackles last year with 8 run stops. This guy, all around solid. You can play him at free safety, in the box, or even at weak side linebacker. I think he can contribute right away on special teams, and his ideal scenario would be to become an Adrian Phillips kind of guy. And Adrian Phillips, he was also an undrafted free agent. Now let's go to the cornerbacks. Robert Kennedy from NC State. Robert is 5'9", 192 pounds. He was a 2-star recruit out of Pennsylvania. He went the JUCO route and ended up playing his final year at NC State and was primarily a nickelback. He has good ball skills. He matched up well against smaller and fast wide receivers than he did against bigger bodied targets. He struggles to disengage with blockers, but plays the run really well. He's a willing tackler. He can blitz from the slot. He does well to dip underneath the tackle to force pressure on the pocket. He had good production at NC State, but missed 5 tackles and allowed 5 touchdowns. He needs to stay consistent in both tackling and in coverage in order to stick around in the NFL, but he certainly flashed some really good ability. He is undersized, but played all over for NC State because of his tenacity and his willingness to get his hands dirty. He plays fast. He has great closing speed. He's an opportunistic player, constantly looking to get his hands on the ball, whether that be forcing a fumble, swatting the ball away, or even just catching interceptions. This is a guy who made plays on that NC State defense that had a lot of good players on it. He could very well make a few big plays in the preseason and earn himself a job either on this team or any other team that needs nickel DB help. Now our last guy, Zamari Walton, the cornerback from Mississippi. Zamari is 6'1", 188 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit out of Florida. He committed to Georgia Tech, played 4 years there before transferring to Ole Miss. He has 5 interceptions, 21 pass breakups, 141 tackles, and 35 run stops in his career. He had an 89.7 run defense grade, but missed 8 tackles and had a 16.3 missed tackle rate. He plays reckless, okay? And he throws himself around like Jaleel Adai used to. He's quick to diagnose and has scary closing speed with no regard for human life once he gets to the ball carrier, including his own life. He played a lot of the deep third in that Ole Miss defense and had a good feel for where wide receivers were in space. Most of his highlights are just like coming downfield from that deep spot and smacking guys. He'll miss at times, but he's always looking for the hard hit. He moves well in the back pedal, explodes downfield. He's tough. He plays the run well with good zone coverage ability. We got some real good competition coming in this DB room with all of these rookies that we drafted and an undrafted free agency. I think every single one of these guys has a legit shot to make the team. So that is every defensive undrafted free agent. If you didn't see the offensive undrafted free agents, then you can click right here. This is actually a playlist of everybody the Chargers drafted and every single undrafted free agent. This took a lot of work.